Welcome back to another episode of Reels Like the First Time, where I am on a mission to experience all that film has to offer, the good and the bad, for the very first time. Joining me today to talk about 1993's Hard Target is comedian whose special Alive and Well will be releasing very, very soon. He's also host of the podcast Rotten Tomatoes Was Wrong, and most importantly, dog dad to Molly the Wonder Dog herself. It's the one and only Mark Ellis. Hello, Mark.
Allison, it is so great to see you, to hear your voice again, and to be joining you on a show that is still in the world of movie trivia, although we're not going to be like testing each other this time. We just get to
Right.
celebrate. I would say with this particular film, it's neither the good nor the bad of cinema, but it is the mulleted of movies. And it's one of the finest showcases of what you can really do with a denim outfit. There's nothing this movie won't do for me except bring me grief, because every time I rewatch
Right.
it, it just makes me happy, puts me in that special place again. So I'm so excited that you are now finally amongst us, those who walk the earth, saying we have seen the greatness that is Hard Target.
I can now add Hard Target to, I can now add like a member of the club of not only have I seen Money Plane, but now I've seen Hard Target. It is such a great group to be a part of. And like you mentioned, I think kind of the best part about Hard Target and experiencing this for the very first time is you're also experiencing multiple genres of film within the first 45 minutes.
Oh, this thing takes you on a ride. The emotions that one feels, the veers, the twists, the turns. It's not unlike one of the subjects in the film who's basically running through their life,
Yeah.
running for their life, darting into all corners of seedy downtown New Orleans and ducking and dodging and doing whatever you can to survive. That's pretty much what it feels like this movie is trying to do as well, just to
Yeah.
please the audience. And boy, I saw this movie in the theater and I left with a smile on my face then, and it still brings me a lot of joy. Though I can admit that there are some hammy moments that may
Sure.
not stand the test of time quite as well as some of the films that adorn your office wall.
Of course. Well, they all can't be the greatest of all time, right? Like you got Big Trouble in Little China, no, nothing, but they try. Well, before we dive too far into Hard Target, I always love starting off my episodes with getting a little bit of background information from my guests. And what I love to know first, Mark, is where did you get your love for movies from? Like, where did it start?
I believe it started in a basement in Rockville, Maryland, which is where my old man was stationed in the Air Force at the time. We moved all around the country when I was a kid. I was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I spent all of 6 weeks there before we got transferred to Panama City, Florida. And then we went back up to Rockville, Maryland, and that's where we had this cool little basement where all of us kids would run down and play. And I'm pretty sure that playing on a loop were films like Star Wars, A New
Sure.
Hope, The Wizard of Oz, and Annie was also a big one for me growing. There's actually video footage of me as like a 4-year-old, and my parents are saying, "All right, Mark, what movie do you want to watch? Do you want to watch Star Wars?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "Do you want to watch Annie?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I
Yeah.
wasn't. The force wasn't always as strong with me as it is today. I had a lot of
You
matriculation
have
to do.
range. You have range. That's all. That's what that is.
I have an eclectic taste in movies from a very young age, and so I mean, you see stuff like Wizard of Oz or like Star Wars, and you want to know more about it, and you want to keep rewatching it because there's so
Yeah.
many great moments. And that, I think, like a lot of kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s, like I did, that was sort of your culture. Is you feel like a part of that world, and it makes you interested. It makes you want to engage with that universe a little more often. And so
Mhm.
then more movies get added. You discover there's more Star Wars movies, there's more musicals, there's more anything else. And as you get a little bit older, I can speak for the boys in the room that there's just something about an action movie that captivates. I can't quite put my finger on it, but
Yeah.
it's sort of like one day we're going to be that guy in that situation. And now we got to study all these movies and do our homework so that we can come out the victor as well.
So we can be Tom Cruise jumping out of a plane in the stratosphere with, with the oxygen mask on when we grow up. That's exactly what that is.
I mean, I'd be lying to you if I told you that my brother and I never tried to tie the garden hose around our waist like John McClane and just jump off the second floor. Do not try that at home, kids. It does
Dude.
not work quite as well as the fire hose from
No.
Nakatomi Plaza.
Exactly. Well, so then with that being said, when I so the whole reason Hard Target got brought up was for a lot of the people who do watch, they know from you are one of the founding members or founding with the movie Trivia Schmodown and host, and we had you on an episode of the after show that for the Schmodown that I was on, Spin from the Reel, and we played this little game called Starring Molly, where we cast Molly in other movies, and you had said that Molly would take over the Wilford Brimley role of Hard Target. So I then knew that I had to have you on to talk about this movie. So, but what is it about this movie? Because again, everyone when I said I was watching it and then talking with you about it with certain people, they all went, "Oh, that makes sense." So why would people have that reaction?
Well, probably if you know me from the Schmodown, you know that season 1, I was one of the primary question writers, and so when I wasn't competing, and so a lot of the answers to questions were either Hard Target or Van Damme movies, and that's something that the Inglorious one, Sam Levine, will still remind me of, is when I faced him in our one and only Schmodown matchup. I defeated him. Somewhat on the strength of the fact that I not only spun the Van Damme category in round 2, I think my 3-point question, I think in round 3 was a Van Damme movie that I got correct. And so been a big Jean-Claude Van Damme fan because back in the early 90s when I was really coming of age and like hanging out with my friends and you debate who's tougher, Arnold or Stallone, there was this new crop of younger action stars coming up that was your Van Dammes of the world and your Steven Seagals. And
Right.
that's kind of fun. That's anytime a new generation has somebody that they feel like is their own, you kind of want to claim ownership and say, that's my guy. Like you like the older generation, you can have your Arnolds, you can have your Slies. I like those movies, but I also kind of want the guy that I can root for, that I'm going to come up and watch their movies for the next decade plus. So when a movie like Under Siege hits or Hard to Kill or with Van Damme, I remember my brother and I, we always were able to talk our way into buying tickets to movies that were rated R. We were way too young to see. One such film was Double Impact, where Van Damme plays not one but 2 roles. It was
2 Van Dammes,
and yet no Oscar nomination. I don't know how that happens. We saw that, and anytime you're watching an action movie, you look for those cool set pieces that you can try to recreate when you get home. And so Double Impact had a number of those, and I think from that point on, Van Damme was our guy because like you look at that dude, and especially back then, he was just such an Adonis. He was a temple, and he could kick ass, and he didn't just kick ass like as a brute. He had this balletic quality to the way he was doing stuff because Steven Seagal was very technical in his movements when he was just breaking everybody's arm. Stallone and Sly relied as much on weaponry as they did their muscles, but Van Damme was just doing this with equal measures brawn and beauty. And so you're like, okay, that's the guy that maybe all women want to be with, but also he can beat the crap out of any other person in the room. And so I kind of want to be him. And then Hard Target came out. So we rented all the other Van Damme movies. Then Hard Target was coming out. And I remember leading into Hard Target was the Arnold film Last Action Hero. And in that movie, Arnold plays a fictionalized version of himself, and he's the star of a series of films called Jack Slater. So, and then that's also the film that young Austin O'Brien gets sucked into with the magical movie ticket.
Right.
So at the premiere of Jack Slater 4, towards the end of the film, we're reaching the climax. All these other action stars made cameos on the red carpet. Like they were all jacked to go see Jack Slater 4, one of which was Van Damme. And so my brother and I were like, hey, that's the guy. And he had this like long hair. And we're like, we've never seen him with long hair before. And he looks like Vega from Street Fighter. So like he looked awesome. And so we're like, what the hell? As I'm leaving the theater of Last Action Hero at Carmike Cinemas at Williamsburg Crossing in Virginia, there was a huge banner with the Hard Target arrow and the logo and Van Damme with the haircut coming out in August. And I'm like, that's it. And I crap you not. still to this day in my bedroom back in Williamsburg, Virginia, is that very same banner
I
that
love
I
that.
probably called about once every 3 days. Hey, when are you guys done using the banner? Can I please have it? I finally got it, and it does not fit in a bedroom, by the way. It's like
Of
on
course.
3 walls,
Yeah.
but mom hasn't taken it down yet. And
That's
so
funny.
yeah, and so then that was like the movie that I had to go see that summer. Like that was my summer movie calendar. It was basically mow enough lawns or do enough chores to get money to go see Hard Target in August. But I did have a I'll say I had a date to Hard Target.
Ooh, that's
It was my
exciting.
it was my mom. I was in 8th grade, so I had to pay for both of us, but
Right,
she
right,
ended up
right.
going.
That's amazing. Um, this movie, so it's so funny. I love hearing you talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme. Did you ever watch the Amazon show Jean-Claude Van Johnson?
You know what? I did. I don't know that I finished it, but I loved what it was about,
The
and I loved
concept
that
is yeah.
he was winking and nodding at himself, and I also loved JCVD, which is kind of the film where he plays another fictionalized version of
Yeah.
himself. It's a lot more real and gritty than what you would see in, say, when Arnold was playing himself in Last Action Hero. So
Mhm,
it was really cool to see a guy like that um it take ownership of his career, because at that
mhm.
point Van Damme was already past his prime doing these JCVD and like Jean-Claude Van Johnson, and it's
Right.
like what can I do with my career now, where you're not necessarily the revered actor that a Liam Neeson or a Denzel Washington is,
Right.
because those fellows can just coast into like late middle age, 60s, 70s. We have our AARP benefits, but we're still kicking ass. That's not
Right.
necessarily Van Damme, and it's certainly not Steven Seagal. We don't
You're
even need to
right.
talk about what that guy's been doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and so I think that was the place for him to transition from where he was at his apex, which was the early to mid 90s, when he did stuff like Hard Target, and then the following year with Time Cop.
Mhm. Time Cop is another one that I have not seen. My knowledge in Van Damme movies is a lot more limited, um, believe it or not, but, the ones that I have seen, Hard Target is definitely gonna be at the top of the list. So and then even going into that, so released in 1993, directed by John Woo, his first US directorial debut. Um, would you say you're a John Woo fan as well? Like, do you have like a top 3 for his movies?
I am now. At the time, I knew who he was, and I knew he was
Mhm.
this like Hong Kong action director that was super revered. I even remember being in line at the Carmike Cinemas where Hard Target. It's funny because they had the huge banner at Williamsburg Crossing, but it was cross town to the much filthier movie theater that was on Monticello in Williamsburg. It was another Carmike Cinemas, and you go like downstairs to the theaters, and we were in line to get popcorn because I'm getting corn for this movie.
Of
So
course.
it's me and my mom, and my brother and my dad went. My brother and my dad were going to go see The Fugitive, which was in theaters at the same time.
Okay, right.
So and I felt, in retrospect, I feel really bad for my mom, and this is why she's the best, because she loved Harrison Ford, and she's
But
like, "I'll take my."
she
Uh,
sacrificed for you. That's
yeah,
that's a mother's love.
I guess her and my dad probably played rock paper scissors out of our
And she
earshot,
lost.
and she definitely lost. She was the scissors to my dad's rock, and so they got to go see The Fugitive. But we were in line getting popcorn, and one of my dad's friends bumped into us and was talking about. He was excited. He was a film buff, and he said, "Oh yeah, John Woo. I mean, this guy's made so many great movies." And I'm just kind of listening to him. And since
Mhm.
then, I've seen all the Hard Boileds and stuff like that, and even some of the stuff that he's done in the Americas since Hard Target, stuff like Face Off. And you just I love the way that he shoots movies. And if you look at it on paper, this matchup of John Woo's sort of slow-mo action style, where you're really showcasing the movement, the technique, the beauty of martial
Mhm.
arts, and you marry that to what Jean-Claude Van Damme's physical capabilities are, this is a win-win. I mean, this is
Yeah,
but on paper, you don't have egos involved. It's
right.
just what your talents are. So it seems like it would have been a match made in heaven.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned this. The one thing that I've not seen any of John Woo's like Hong Kong action movies. Hard Boiled is probably going to be coming up at some point on the podcast with the good old JTE. We've been talking about it, but
I saw it
um,
with him. I think I went with him and Finstock. It was a who's who of celebs.
gotta love that.
The three of us were in there. We went to Tarantino's place out here in LA at the New Beverly
Uh-huh.
to go see. He was running a bunch of Hong Kong action films that weekend, so we saw a bunch of them. But Hard Boiled was definitely one of the standouts because it's just still the action is just so kinetic and it just jumps off the screen at you,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is thanks to John Woo.
He's yeah, and the John Woo movie, the American movies that I've seen, I know that it's gonna be some beautiful slow motion. I know
Yep.
that it's gonna be some amazing action, and there's always gonna be doves or birds.
There's always going to be doves, and there's always going to be the clever usage of a canister of gasoline
yeah.
somehow to create an explosion thanks to one bullet shooting through it that will
Yeah.
make this giant, just like fireball on the other side of it, just like you drew it up.
And then somehow there's 7 or 8 other more explosions that come from it because one wasn't enough. That somehow
Never is.
there's even more. Yeah, no, I had so many thoughts. I even messaged you like as I was watching it. So this movie starts and it's going, and the score that's playing with it, I'm like, okay, so this is gonna be more of like a thriller, like noir movie, right? And then it takes a really hard turn to now we're in New Orleans and she's getting, accosted by the creepy men trying to steal, her money. And now it's a Western. We're getting Western music and like the showdown. And then we go into, we're like, no. It's also martial arts because he's kicking someone in the head. And so literally everyone I was like, what is this? And I name all these things and literally every response I get is yes. That's exactly what it is. It's all those genres, and then it ends up being an action movie at the end.
It's everything wrapped up into one. It's a cornucopia of cinematic achievement. I love the way the movie starts because it very quickly locks you into this dirty underbelly of a city
Yeah.
where the desperation is real. You see somebody running for their lives. You don't know at the time that is the father that Yancey Butler is searching for. You just realize that, oh, that's just some guy who's really desperate. He really wants to get away from these people who are shooting him with freaking arrows. And
Arrows.
we're not sure what the hell is going on, but we just know that this guy's at the end of his rope. Even if he survives this, he's not doing well. So something went wrong in
Right.
his life to put him in this position. And then we see the nice, it's sunny, and it's the nice part of we're just driving, and it's a beautiful day, and the top is down, and we're in Louisiana, and seeing that setting. And then there's this little cafe, and the vanity shots, the pulp action shots of meeting Van Damme for the first time when he's trying to, charm his way out of paying for his gumbo.
It's a travesty.
You see the greasy hair. You see that Chance is known around town. His character Chance Boudreau, because the waitress can't help but laugh at him. He's just got this way about him where he is somebody that you never really want to hang out with unless you
Mhm.
need him. But when you need somebody to get you out of a jam, he's the guy you call.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up that it feels like a Western when we have that first action sequence when all these thugs, and you kind of believe that these thugs are around this area because it's a seedy diner, and what we saw in the opening credits just looks like it's almost like a southern version of Gotham City where there's
Yeah.
just a lot of crime and desperation going on. And so you kind of believe that these ne'er-do-wells are just going to corner this girl because they see a nice car and they see her holding her purse,
Mhm.
and that's theirs now. As far as they're concerned, she ended up on the wrong part of town. That's her fault. And the part when Van Damme walks out and he's wearing his trench coat, and
Yeah.
all he has to do is usher his trench coat aside to reveal his leg. Anytime you're in a fight and a guy moves his trench coat just to make sure that his leg has a clear
It's
pathway
free.
to elevate above his head and kick you in the face, you might just want to walk in the other direction.
Absolutely. 100%. Like the way that he just like I think the Van Damme I've always loved because of the kicks and his style of martial arts and how he does things. Like I've seen Bloodsport is I think one of his obviously, I think that's kind of a giveaway, but like one of his best movies, and watching him fight in Bloodsport, and then
Yeah.
getting to finally see that in this, because it's really not the only reason there's martial arts probably in this movie is because it's Jean-Claude Van Damme. Because I was doing a little research for this little mini segment I've been kind of trying to work in, that if it's on Wikipedia, it's true. But supposedly, John Woo wanted Kurt Russell for Van Damme's role, but he was too booked up. Like, he was booked out for like 2 years in advance, so he couldn't get Kurt Russell for that part.
I would have bought it with Kurt Russell too, because he was just a megawatt star anyway. But Kurt Russell, especially in the 90s, he really was committing to these action roles to the point. I mean, he is absolutely shredded in the
Mhm.
movie Soldier, but he's also like this badass type Marine in Stargate, which would come out the next year. And so he definitely had a full calendar and couldn't
Mhm.
squeeze this one in. But I think that for what this movie was, it might have just been like another sort of Kurt Russell movie. I like Kurt Russell more in like the executive decision style, where he's sort of like a Bruce Willis everyman, where we know this guy can kick ass,
Yeah.
but he's a respectable adult. And he just gets thrust into that situation where a guy like Van Damme, as soon as you see him, you know that everybody's going to try to mess with this dude, try to take their best
Right.
shot, and he's going to wipe the floor with all of them. And I do love seeing how tough Yancey Butler, her character Natasha, is early on,
Mhm.
because she's not just like, okay, here's my purse to these guys. She's
Yeah.
like, she's doing everything she can. She knows that she's taken self-defense classes. She probably had a tough upbringing, knowing that her dad was in and out of her house, and like this is something that she is used to, is teaching the boys and setting them straight.
Mhm.
And she can't overpower these guys. Chance steps in, and here we go.
Yep. That was one of my I actually have that down. I think that's probably one of my favorite moments of this film, because I think that's one of the best showcases of Van Damme and his athleticism, along with punching a fucking snake.
Yep,
Like,
yep. Yep, he knocks a snake out later in the movie. I mean, first of all, to have a guy you're with to just like grab a rattlesnake,
right.
and like here's what he's doing. He's not just punching a rattlesnake because he's bored. He's setting a trap for people who are following him.
Rips the
So
rattle off. Just,
yeah, I mean, it probably would have been a better idea just to like kill the snake and tie it around a tree like a rope and have the guys trip over it that are
right.
following him.
But
But
no, he's
he he punches the snake to sleep. He knows exactly how hard to punch a snake to where it doesn't die, just passes out. And it's so passed out that the snake doesn't feel him bite its rattle
rattle.
off. He bites its rattle off, and the snake doesn't immediately wake up with pain. The snake's like, "Man, I'm just in a
I'm
daze.
good. We're
I'll deal
fine.
with whatever just happened to my butt later." And so he wraps it around a tree, and then he connects it to where when the next person walking by steps on it,
Yeah.
that is what's going to wake the snake up,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be a happy snake. What I love about that is clearly not the first time he's done this. He has done
Right.
this since he was 10 years old messing with his friends, and now he finally has a reason to use it.
Right. I think even the better part of that is, before he punches the snake, he hits it on top of the head to like irritate it some more, and then he punches it. Like, he
He's
gives a
warming
little
it
like
up. They call
he gives
that
it like a
priming
little
the snake.
smack.
He's just making sure, and there is no doubt that that maneuver was taught to him by Wilford Brimley's Uncle Boudreaux, who is just this Cajun cartoon who claims that he used to have a shotgun. However, an alligator ate it. Animals do amazing things in this movie.
They sure do. That was my other note I have in all capital letters, is what is with Wilford Brimley's accent in this.
My brother and I have a theory that that was not in the script. That was not a John Woo directorial decision. Wilford Brimley showed up. They were happy to have this revered actor from Our House and Cocoon, and he just starts doing this accent, and they're like, "Guys, just let him do it. Just let him go." I don't think Wilford Brimley knew he was in a movie. I think Wilford Brimley was just having fun at his house, and that's just what he felt like doing that summer. And he happened to let cameras into his place.
This I have to put this on the list of like amazing performances for absurd reasons, and, like, it's gonna be right up there tied with, like, Kelsey Grammer in Money Plane for, like, the insanity of just the accent that if riding bareback, like, he can't put a saddle on his horse, he's just riding through the forest bareback like it's nothing.
That's just how you do it when you're hanging out with good old Wilford, and it's just funny to think like the amount of research he did for that character probably just included seeing a 30-second spot for Ruffles potato chips that came out in I think 1988 or 89. They introduced the Cajun flavor of Ruffles potato chips, and so they had this like old like Cajun kind of talking dude
Yeah.
on there, and he would say like it's got cayenne pepper, onion, and I think that was all the research that Wilford did. He's like, oh, that's how everybody down there talks. I'm gonna take it up a notch.
I'm gonna take and he slips and the best part is listening to him slip in and out of it. And
Yeah.
like what like it's only like it's like every other word he hits it, and
Mhm.
then the rest is just Wilford Brimley's
Yep.
voice.
Yep. Yep.
It was amazing. Where does Hard Target land on like your list of favorite Van Damme movies?
It is my favorite Van Damme movie. I think the best Van Damme movie is the film that I'm going to be coming back on this show for to make you watch Time Cop. Um, Double Impact is way up there. Time Cop, I think, is like a legit, really well done film. And Hard
Yeah.
Target is, I think Hard Target's a great action movie, particularly for the action set pieces that are ludicrous and ridiculous. But there's just some great stuff in there that I'd never seen before. Like you're kind
Mhm.
of when you're watching these movies, especially when you're in, when I was in junior high, you're looking for moves and sequences and setups that you'd never seen before.
Mhm.
And the action scene that's still my favorite to this day in the film is right after this poor bastard who's just one of the middlemen for our henchmen led by Lance Henriksen and Arnold
Mhm.
Vosloo. He gets shot in his own car as he's trying to leave town. And then unfortunately, we also have our cop hero
Mhm.
who is so hardworking she shoves her own little birthday cake into the desk to not blow the candle out in time. She's great in the film, but she gets shot here, and so we realize that she just got shot. We're in a bad setting. We need to get out of here quick. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, there's a lot more henchmen coming for Chance. And so Chance, when there's a motorcycle riding and Chance runs on the opposite side of a parked car, uses the parked car to jump up and kick the dude off his
Yes.
motorcycle. I had never seen that before. It was one of the coolest moves to this day. I think it's such an awesome shot in an action movie.
Yeah.
And he's doing all these things that would later be pointed out to me. For instance, at the end sequence, when we're in this just like random storage house for any parade that is going to happen to be in New Orleans, it's like Mardi
Right?
Gras. It's like the perfect mix of Mardi Gras and a self storage unit. They're fighting in this, and there's this one guy that Van Damme has a gun, and so he just shoots him 10 times, and then
Yeah.
he does a spin kick. And I remember like showing my friends this movie that they hadn't seen in the theater, and like it had finally come out on home video. And so we rented it like day one, and my friends are watching it. We're loving it. But my one friend goes like, "Why did he kick the guy? He was already dead." And it's like, just to, like you could also just do this and knock him over, but
Yeah.
you had to do that slow mo spin jump kick,
Absolutely.
and I'd never seen anything done like that to that level. I'd seen similar moves in stuff like Bloodsport, but
Yeah.
just never portrayed as epic as it was
Right.
there. I mean, you're watching somebody's highlight reel in the same way that if you're a fan of Michael Jordan or Joe Montana, you rewatch a lot of those games, but you also see the highlights in slow motion, and it's this NFL Films drama. John Woo is basically the NFL Films of action movies, where he's capturing the same stuff that you've seen before in a very new, inventive, captivating way. And I think that's one of the selling points. I think that those are the scenes where Hard Target still holds up.
Absolutely. You also forgot to mention before he kicks the motorcyclist off of his motorcycle, he removes the trench coat that he's been wearing the entire time in this hot New Orleans sun to
It is
reveal
very hot.
his Canadian tuxedo of all denim to then go continue to kick ass throughout the
He
rest of
goes
the movie.
right from the Canadian tuxedo, then he takes the shirt off, and then all of a sudden he's at he's at the Alabama prom, and he's
Yeah.
got the He's got the just the standard white tank top with the jeans and just ready for action.
It's a
And
great
so,
look.
sometimes they just it just gets so ridiculous. Like, I don't know that you can put a motorcycle in cruise control, and if you could, I don't know that it's smart to stand on top of it as there's cars full of bad guys shooting at you, and you just
It's
think you're not
just
going to
so
hit.
fun.
But the defense I'll lob at it is that sequence is immediately following the really cool car jump kick and a bunch of other neat moves.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's just running on pure adrenaline at that point, and he was what athletes would say in the zone.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't miss. Nobody can guard you. So he's kind of got that Geronimo ability where no bullet is going to hit this guy. If you shoot him
Right.
and he's right in your sights, somehow that bullet is just going to veer around Van Damme because he is untouchable. It's like when Super Mario gets the star and is just
Right.
running and
It
running
just
through
goes.
bad guys. That's exactly what he was feeling in that moment. So that's why it was mind over matter. That's
That's
why he was able to
amazing.
survive that highway shootout.
I love it. Yeah, I do. I really enjoy the turn that this movie takes from like these small action moments where like, okay, are we getting a martial arts movie? Are we getting this kind of mystery thriller noir? And then I love it just takes that hard turn right there at that kind of really that shootout where he kills the one guy in the car and the big old he just I have to I do have to mention the one-liners that we get from Arnold Vosloo with, Pick and with Lance Henriksen throughout this whole movie is hilarious. To then play off like when Van Damme when they roll up and see the guy dead, he's like, what did he say? Something like he's like, seems like we were a little too late, or like we missed the Sterling or whatever. It's and the amount of times they keep saying it's hunting season on you. Now I'm hunting you. It's the most
It was a big thing. I mean, you got to declare hunting season, especially if you're hunting your fellow humans as game. Then you got to really declare. You got to let everybody in
right.
town know. And Lance Henriksen as Emile Fouchon is just he's always like such a great presence in movies, and he's just that guy that he doesn't need to go method. He doesn't need to do, and he just needs to roll out of bed, show up, and he just believe whatever character he's playing. And I actually think that he lends a lot of credibility to this movie as our main antagonist. Like,
Yeah.
he does make you believe that he is this super rich guy. He probably got his money through ill-gotten gains, and now he enjoys hunting people for sport, which goes as far back as like Rudyard Kipling tales,
Yeah.
at least as far as like modern culture goes. And I'm sure back way before then, hunting people was a thing that rich people did. This movie made me distrust rich folks intrinsically because
Yeah.
when you see Emil at his like natural habitat, he's in this nice house and he's like playing piano, and it's like, oh
Uh-huh.
yeah, and I'm about to go hunt somebody. And the people that sign up for his sport,
Mhm.
they are also rich, and they're like doctors and lawyers and stuff, and they just really want to go hunt the ultimate game, which is unfortunately people like you and me who are like,
Right.
how much? $10,000? Yeah, if you give me $10,000 and you just say make it to the river, I like my odds. I
Right.
don't know that I'm going up against somebody like Pick, who is played by
Right.
Arnold Vosloo, who that was my introduction to Vosloo, but he would go on to star as, again, usually a bad guy, but in big time movies like The Mummy, and he's great. He also has this just scary, looming presence,
Yes.
and the first time I saw that was in Hard Target.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so my husband makes fun of me quite a bit because I'm really bad at recognizing people and knowing what I see them from. Like for example, I literally stand by the fact that if you put like Daniel Day-Lewis in front of me in everyday clothing, I could not tell you that's Daniel Day-Lewis because I'm so used to seeing him with like curly Q mustaches and beard and like he's such so like with Arnold with Arnold Vosloo, we're watching this movie. He's watching Hard Target with me. We're going through, and then all of a sudden, as I go through, I'm in my head, I'm like, where the fuck is this guy from? And then I go into my eye, I look at my, I go, that's who that is. He goes, what? I go, that's the guy from The Mummy. And from my husband, he
Yep.
goes, we're an hour and a half in. We're almost done with this movie. You just realized this.
It's so tough when you know it and you don't want to look it up. You're like, no, I can get this on my own. And it's like, if this was the Schmodown, the bell would have dinged an hour ago. Like, you're out of time.
100%. I was never going to win a showdown match in my life, but that was never dude, I am not a phone a friend. I am nothing. But yeah, he's menacing in this. And I think it's I love the line too after when Lance Henriksen, tells him to get in go from the air and find him and we'll ambush him over here. And Pick goes, I'll get him from there. It's like, and Henriksen tells him no. And then afterwards he walks up and he goes, when he realized if he's wrong, but he's still gonna try to give him, he's like, do you forgive me, Pick? Like Pick's just whatever. Let's just get the guy. What are you gonna do?
I always thought that was like, okay, because the first time you see this movie and you're blown away by all this stuff, you're like, wait, why are the helicopters having such bad aim? Why can't they hit him? And then it's because that was what Emil ordered them to do, was to just shoot him, just to try to get him into this weird storage space, because that's where he wants to kill him. Like, he's such a refined assassin and such a menacing bad guy. Instead of taking the time that a James Bond villain would to explain the plot of what his dastardly plan is, he didn't really have a grand scheme that is anything more than, I enjoy hunting humans for sport. So he's like, I want to get him on my terms. To quote Emil, he says, any pinhead can take him from the air. I want to take him from the ground. This is personal. This is competition. This is something like if you challenged Michael Jordan to shoot a free throw left-handed and you told him he couldn't do it, then he's like, you know what? I know I can make it with my right hand. Watch me make it with my left hand with my eyes closed. It's that kind of challenge that Emil thrives on. And a guy like Fouchon, who says earlier in the movie, what we need is a change of scenery. When he's talking to Pick, he's like, look, we're done with New Orleans. It's getting a little hot down here, literally and figuratively, with law enforcement. We need to go to like Europe. We need to go somewhere else. And so I think that Emil in his head is looking at Chance Boudreaux as his ultimate prize in America. That's his winning a championship here. And so as soon as he caps this guy, then I guess in his competitive nature will allow him to say, I have conquered the United States. Now I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Am I rationalizing this movie better than anybody?
I love it. This is amazing. This is probably like, I'm probably never going to record another episode again. This is like the piece de resistance. Like, this is it. Like, this is the series finale. I love it.
You want the kicker to this whole movie? The best part about it is you watch this movie, this crazy action set. We're all wounded and almost dead at the end. It was all over $217, because that's what Van Damme charged Nat to help her, to show her around the city to see if she could find her old man, because we come to find out that was her dad at the beginning of the movie. He was killed. She doesn't know that. He's just gone missing. That's why she's in New Orleans in the first place. And Van Damme, meanwhile, his character Chance, he's great at beating people up. He's not the best union worker. He owes some dues. He owes $217 worth of dues, and he can't get on another ship to get a job until he's able to pay those dues off. And so he, and in a great John Woo set Van Damme vanity look, when Nat shows up to recruit Chance Boudreaux, this guy who just saved her life from these thugs, to help her find her dad. We're looking for him. We don't know where he is. And for some reason, there's a bunch of oil barrels being moved. And then we move the last barrel, and then here comes Van Damme, who now has a reason to help her because he needs money, and he charges her $217 to help her find
that greasy haired Van Damme with that mullet. That's a good look. I was a big fan of it.
Never greasier than in that shot, or right before that shot when he's just tying knots to stay in not tying shape, and we get this awesome soaring early 90s guitar. Sounded like something from like the Scorpions, cut tracks. And we do see that this guy's got some talent, and like he would be good at his job on a ship, but he's just down on his luck, and he's looking for something basically to do, but also he's looking for his purpose. And until that reveals itself for what the rest of his life is going to be, he now has at least a way to make some money, and that is by killing a bunch of bad guys and biting the rattles off of snakes.
Yeah. Not to, quote and or steal an idea from another really successful, fantastic podcast that I enjoy, but when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score for Hard Target, it sits at a 60%. It is not certified fresh. But is Rotten Tomatoes wrong? Should it be higher?
They completely missed the mark with this. The tomato meter may have never been more wrong than it is here. And I'm actually thrilled that it is fresh, and that's right on the cut line, by the way. Like 59% is rotten, 60% is fresh, and so as long as it's hanging around fresh territory, I am thrilled. I am tickled pink. I think Van Damme's probably only got like three or four fresh flicks, and the fact that Hard Target is one of them does make my heart sing.
That's amazing. Unfortunately, the audience doesn't quite agree with its 49%, but they just sound like people who don't know how to have fun.
They really don't. I will tell you right now, my mom was not one of those people, because my mom and I walking out of the theater, she had a good time too, because like, let's be honest, Van Damme ain't the worst guy to look at wearing
No.
a tank top, and the action's fun. And she was telling me on the way home, like, she wanted to make sure I wasn't like going to take this movie too seriously and try to like go out in the woods and like fight snakes.
Try to
But
do high kicks on your brother.
but she also was like, I understand the attraction of these movies. That like she understood what a kid in 7th or 8th grade like wanted to get out of that movie. So she was happy that her idiot son got that.
Yeah.
And then we're waiting in the lobby for a couple minutes, and then out comes my dad and my brother out of the Fugitive screening, and they're just lit up like, we just saw the best movie ever. And my mom's like, all right, we're going back to see this next week.
Right.
And we did. We all went. I think all four of us actually went the next week to all go see The Fugitive, and it's a pretty great movie. The Fugitive might hold up a little bit better, but Dr. Richard Kimball, if he had employed the snake biting and the martial arts tactics that Van Damme has, I think we would have wrapped things up in that movie a little bit earlier.
For sure. 100% agreed. I mean, I'm a fan of The Fugitive. I enjoy it, but I agree. If he had more prowess like Jean-Claude Van Damme, like a chance Boudreaux, we would have been a much quicker, more satisfying movie, I think, for sure. So kind of going about that, so kind of leading into, if you had to, what another thing real quick on if it's on Wikipedia, it's true fact, is, so the movie released August 1993 in the United States, making it supposedly, according to Wikipedia, the first film by an Asian director to be released by a major Hollywood studio.
Yeah, and I think it opened. Did it open at number one? Because The Fugitive had been in theaters for. It might have opened at number two after The
number
Fugitive.
two. I think the first week it says theatrical release, because I have Wikipedia pulled up right here.
I'm gonna guess $14 million opening weekend, which wasn't a bad chunk of change back then. I know Box Office Mojo is an absolute mess.
So I got the box office right here. So grossing, it opened during opening weekend. The film opened in second place, grossing 10 million in business, showing at almost a little under 2,000 locations.
If we had gotten into 2,000 theaters, it would have made $14 million. I adjusted for inflation. But I mean, it's still, back then, if you could make like $30-40 million on an action movie, and this one did have a budget that I think got a little inflated because there were some shooting difficulties on set, because Van Damme and John Woo did end up not seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. I think Van Damme was really pushing for a lot of those vanity shots, and John Woo wanted to do some different stuff. It was really all in both their wheelhouses. I just think that at that point, Van Damme was sort of at his peak, both physically, but also kind of self-confidence wise. And John Woo is just trying to work with this new style of filmmaking in the West. And so it wasn't the easiest shoot to pull off, but you wouldn't know any of that from watching the final product. It might explain why we didn't get Hard Target 2 for a long time. And when it did finally happen, we didn't get Van Damme in it, but I will say Scott Adkins, martial arts legend, takes over like the protagonist role in Hard Target 2, and Scott Adkins is one of the all-time greats doing that stuff.
So I have to bring you, so you're saying you want to come back and talk about Hard Target 2 after Time Cop? We'll
Look, Hard Target 2 is okay. There is no tomato meter for Hard Target 2, I don't think. There's an audience score, and it's like way down in the toilet, but young,
what do they know?
8th grade Mark Ellis did write a treatment for Hard Target 2. I don't really know how to write a script yet, but I wrote, I was just writing it sort of like as like a novel. And I wrote an action scene where there's like two bad guys on either side of Van Damme. So what he does is he jump kicks the one in the head, and then he uses that very temporary footing with his foot on a guy's face to twist in the air, and then use his other leg to kick the other guy on the other side. And it may have seemed a little dreamy and fantastical back in the mid-90s, but now you see that kind of crap in every Fast and Furious movie. My novel, Hard Target 2 novella, was ahead of its time, and I'd like some sort of credit. I'm not asking for royalties. I'm not asking for back end, but just some sort of acknowledgement
Just
from
sort
Vin
of writer's
Diesel and
credit,
co.
just something, just a little something. How many
Yeah.
times, how often would you say you practice trying to do that exact move as you were writing the novella in your
Hey, you will not see a scar on my brother's face, so I have to take the fifth on all of these things. There was a lot of couch jumping. There was a lot of underwater karate fights at the local pool after seeing Hard Target.
of course.
That's why these movies work in the summer, because you can immediately jump in the pool, and then all of a sudden, when you go underwater, you're Van Damme.
Right, exactly. Um, so kind of with all of this being said, I have to ask you for we've talked about a lot about different parts and things that we like, but if you had to list out your top 3 moments in any order from Hard Target, what would they be?
Okay, the shootout slash the using the car as a conduit to prop yourself up to kick somebody off a motorcycle is still number one. I feel like a lot of movies have stolen this next shot from Hard Target, and it's this like you see in every Resident Evil and a lot of the underworlds is the shot of shooting an arrow, and this was kind of like what the selling point of the movie was, that we're hunting people with these really cool super sharp tipped arrows, and
Mhm.
the shot of the arrow going across his face and just dodging it
Yes, okay.
is still so great. And my third favorite moment from Hard Target is one that my brother and I will constantly, we only have to say the word to each other and we start giggling, is the very end of the movie. It looks like Lance Henriksen is going to survive. We have thrown a grenade at him at his and it's actually Van Damme actually slipped a grenade into his pants and then jump kicked him. And so it's like, okay, Lance Henriksen's dead, but then Lance Henriksen doesn't take time, reaches into his pants, pulls out the grenade, unscrews it. I didn't know how grenades work. He unscrews the top of the grenade and then he pulls it apart. And now we're like, oh no, he disarmed the grenade, but he was just holding it close enough to where when this part of the grenade
Yep.
sparked, it triggered the other part of the grenade. And he simply says, whoop. And
Yeah.
it's and so I can still just I can text my brother right now, whoop, and he'll respond with a picture of Lance Henriksen.
That's
And
amazing.
it's one of the dumber ways for your main villain to die, but it also shows the overconfidence
Yeah.
and the ego of somebody like an Emile Fouchon.
Yeah. I actually that's one of mine too. I have that one. I have when Lance Hendrickson explodes, the face that he makes and whoops, like
Mm-hmm.
just that whole scene shoving the grenade in his pants. For mine, I put the that initial street fight scene where you're kind of getting introduced to Van Damme's character and he comes up and because he I think and the whole lead up to it where he's sees her with all the money and then he knows the people that are around and what's happening and he gets up and he walks out and he's just watching and just being very that's where I get like that western feel of it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's almost very John Wayne-ish the way he's watching and looking around and you get like the little guitar riff and the as he
It's
like
so
walks
cool.
up.
I love when a hero is like clocking everything
Yeah.
in the shot, and you can tell sometimes it means that they're like ex special forces. Sometimes it means that they're about to do something nefarious, but more often than not, it just means that they are one step ahead of everyone else. And
Right.
when you're going to beat up not one but a group of bad guys, you need to be able to kind of be like Larry Bird or Magic Johnson on the court, where you can anticipate what's going to happen 2 steps before everybody else does. And
Mhm.
that sequence, it does remind me of something that you'll see in a lot of westerns, and you'll see it in stuff like The Equalizer, where when
Mhm.
Denzel walks into a room, he looks at his watch, he looks at that guy, he looks over here, he knows where the exit is, and he just kind of knows where all the pressure points are.
Mhm. Oh, for or like, I mean, you see even in like Keanu in these John Wick movies, like
Same, yeah.
exactly the same. And then of course my final one was he punches a snake. Like when he tells her to close her eyes and then he reaches and he grabs just the absurdity of that whole scene. It's been like living rent free in my head for the last almost 24
Okay.
hours at this
Let
point.
me defend that snake sequence by asking you this. Would you rather have something as memorable as what turned out to happen, or would you have it feel like what that scene is steering us towards, which is just the every action movie, the hero makes out with the damsel in distress and they become a happy couple and now he's saving her life because they're in love. That's what she thinks is going to happen.
Right.
She's ready to be smooched and she's ready to smooch back.
She's feeling it.
And then he's like, lady, I'm just here to rescue you from a snake. All right. I often wonder about this in my free time is, did they end up having a relationship after that? Did they end up like dating? Did they end up just like, here's your $217? Good luck with the union dues. Yeah. I think a tip is in order, at least a 15% tip is in order for everything he did. I wonder
20 in there.
I feel like they had a shotgun Cajun wedding. I think Uncle Boudreaux performed the ceremony, and I think they divorced 6 months later.
I think that is that how your novella ended? Is that what...
My novella was a little happier. I think they were still. I think they were an item at that. I think she might have even been. It might have been like a True Lies thing, where like you have the first movie is the action star, and then the whole family's involved in the sequel. So
right,
what would have been the sequel to True Lies. So I think that's the way I had it in Hard Target too.
No, I would not have had that scene play out any other way, and I love it so much because of that. Like that is when I told the Flick and Reel guys that we were recording this, and they're like, "Oh, what movie?" I said Hard Target, and Sean immediately responded with the GIF of Jean-Claude Van Damme punching the snake. So that is forever living in my brain rent free, and I
never
love it so
punch
much.
the snake initially. You got to prime it. You got to prime it, pet it, get it to let its defenses down, and then boom.
And then just how angry Lance Henriksen comes up on the guy who was bit by the snake and shoots him, and then does the line of like, if you guys weren't making so much noise or what, like he yells at, it's everyone else's fault that they haven't caught Van Damme because he can keep hearing them because of all the stupidity and how loud they're all being.
Had this movie ended a different way and the bad guys get away scot-free, I feel like whenever they're in Scotland or wherever they're hunting humans heretofore, I do feel like Emil would like be having a drink with Pick and be like, "Hey, you remember that guy who like set that snake trap? That was pretty cool." Like they, deep inside, even the guy who's getting his face bit off by an angry rattlesnake, a rattleless snake, even that guy's like, "Man, this was good. This was a good
that was
setup."
Smart. No, I would never have thought of that. Let's be real.
That guy, every time he's at a bar drinking with like half his face having been bit off, he cannot wait to tell that story
about what happened to him. And then he tells them, "You should see the other guy," which is the snake without the rattle.
Every time he's like, "Hey, I ever tell you the story about the time the rattle?" It's like, "Yes, you've told us the story about the rattlesnake biting you."
Don't make sure you don't serve Uncle Johnny too much whiskey at Thanksgiving because you're gonna hear the damn rattlesnake story again.
You want to wake Uncle Johnny up to sound asleep? Just get a little baby's rattle and just shake it right next to his ear.
Oh, this is good. So I think with all of this being said, this is a good time to go into my Letterboxd where I will rate this movie out of 5 stars. I think for how much fun it is and for everything that's going on in it, I would give Hard Target 3.5 stars.
Boom.
It's a C average. We'll give it.
How do you think I got through school? That is amazing. Because now if we factor that into the tomato meter score, that's actually going to elevate it. And I do want to get Hard Target some more fresh positive reviews because I like 60% is very dare I steal a Steven Seagal film title? It's on deadly ground. We're not safe. It's very shaky territory right now. So I'd like to get it up to like that 64% range before we sleep at night.
I before you close out too, I need to read this quote on Wikipedia that from Roger Ebert and how he described Hard Target. And he said, "It's not very smart and it's not very original, but it is well made on a technical level. The stunts are impressive. As an action picture, it's well made, but it never becomes more than a competent action. And I just can't recommend it for that."
That's fair, but it might not have gotten his thumb up. But if you actually listen to like back in the day, Siskel and Ebert, when they would talk about movies, they could be complimentary about movies that they gave thumbs down to. And I always appreciated it about those two, and particularly with Roger Ebert. I think that guy really went into every movie screening rooting for the movie to be good. He never
Yeah.
wanted to have a bad time. He never wanted to crap on a movie. And so for him to be able to find the good in stuff, I think is very aspiring. And I'd like to see a lot of modern film reviewers and critics kind of take a cue from that, is to root for the movie that you're going to see. Don't
Right.
sugarcoat it, but really try to see what the filmmaker was doing. And try to maybe acknowledge that it's not always easy to make a movie, and there can be a lot of struggles along the way. Such
Right.
was life with Hard Target, but I think the final product ended up being something that everyone involved can be proud of.
This was a very fun movie, and I think this quote from Roger Ebert is literally the epitome of what I call a compliment sandwich. Like, you say you have the good things, and then you put why it's not so great, and then you
Yep.
end it with something
Mhm.
with something good. It's fantastic. Well, Mark, before we sign off and get out of here, thank you again so much for hanging out with me. People say don't meet your your idols or people that you look up to, your hosting abilities and everything that you do. I have looked up to for a long time, and I say no. Bug the shit out of them until they come onto your podcast, because it is worth it.
That is words to live by, and you're more right than you know, because when Christian was doing Collider Live, we eventually got Jean-Claude Van Damme in studio, and we were talking to him, and like his mind goes to a lot of different places really
Yeah.
quick, and I wasn't sure what the hell he was talking about, but I did get a couple laughs out of him, and we did get to talk Hard Target for a little bit, so that's always going to be a fond memory, getting to kick it with JCVD.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, let everyone know, all my tens of listeners and watchers, what you have going on and where they can find you.
Well, after you cover a movie like Hard Target, it's hundreds, if not thousands, of viewers and
Right.
listeners. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to Allison's show. It's always a treat being with her. And you can check me out on all the social media platforms, verified or unverified, doesn't matter. At Mark Ellis Live. If somebody's trying to sell you a PlayStation 5s, it is definitely not me. And my new Irish special, Alive and Well, should be out pretty soon. If you're a fan of the last one, Dog Stepfather, you might get a glimpse of the dog in this one. You just might. If you stick around long enough, you might get a glimpse of that dog that I am a proud papa of.
We love her so much. And to all of you that are watching here on YouTube or listening on your audio platform of choice, thank you so much. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening on audio. And if you're watching here on Flick and Reel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Like this video, it really helps us with the algorithm, and leave your thoughts in the comments too about Hard Target. You can follow the show on Twitter at Reels Like Movies, and you can follow me at Allison Salamoni. And until next time, my friends, be safe. And I have to go watch more movies. Bye.
Like Time Cop.
Coming soon.